My name is Louise. Today, on my 30th birthday, I'm going to make my dream a reality. Louise, congratulations on the launch of your cafe! With that, Ava and Emma, my best friends since junior high, excitedly opened their door. Yes, I finally opened my own cafe, which I had always wanted to do. It was a little before 11 a.m. when the cafe opened. Because it was a pre-opening day, there were no customers. As a result, their upbeat voices echoed throughout the small shop. Thank you, both of you. To celebrate the occasion, they presented me with a large flower arrangement and a tea set. I led them to a table by the window with a nice view, and they immediately ordered the lunch set. It is a really small restaurant, so if there is no one else in the cafe, I'm close enough to them to talk to them while I'm cooking. Louise, I knew it. You've always had good taste, and the way you present things in the restaurant is really cool. After Emma said that, Ava also nodded in agreement. I adore the antique style, which serves as the cafe's main theme, but I kept it simple enough that male customer didn't feel awkward. I'm so happy to hear you compliment me. I brought them the daily set of the omelette toast, salad, and iced coffee. They enjoyed them while complimenting me. I talked to them while I was making flyers to distribute around the neighborhood. Still 2 years ago, I was worried about what would happen. Louise, you were incredible. You really did it all by yourself. Ava spoke to me in a kind voice, and Emma continued. It's true. It must have been really hard for you at that time. Louise, I admire your positive attitude. They said something like that. I appreciate both of you. Life is no fun when you're constantly depressed. You must maintain a positive attitude. I replied cheerfully to both of them, but my heart prickled as I remembered what had happened 2 years before. 2 years ago, I divorced my beloved husband. Oliver, my husband, was a year younger than me. I loved cafes since I was in high school and had worked there part-time. I wanted to open my own cafe someday, so I went to a culinary school. As a result, from high school to vocational school, I worked in the same cafe for 5 years. Oliver was my junior colleague who came to work there. It was my first time having a junior part-time employee come in, and I simply enjoyed teaching him the job. Louise, you appear to enjoy your work here, don't you? One day, Oliver suddenly said that to me. I love it because it's fun. I also enjoy working with you. I want to spend more time with you. Will you go on a date with me sometime? Oliver looked me in the eyes, and I remember nodding and blushing. We began dating, and after Oliver graduated from college, he proposed and we married. I hope that one day we will be able to grow our family, build our own house, and turn a corner of our home into a cafe. Our married life began with such dreams in mind. We lived apart when we were dating, and Oliver was a college student, so I assumed we spent more time together after we married. However, once we were married and began living together, we gradually began to drift apart. Oliver, who works in an office, leaves at 8 a.m. and returns at 6 p.m., but I was already in charge of the cafe manager at that time. In order to meet the preparation time, I would leave the house at 10 a.m. I would take the last train home because the cafe was open late. Furthermore, because of my shift work, Oliver was usually off on weekends, and I was usually off on weekdays. We rarely had the chance to spend a whole day together. One day, after 3 years of such days, Oliver said to me, I want to have a baby, but what do you think? Oliver said something like that. There were a lot of marriages and births going on around us at that time, and Oliver must have had his own thoughts on it. I was thinking about having a baby someday, but it was difficult to find time for just the two of us. And I was thinking that we might have a child someday. But hearing Oliver's words made me happy, and I told him, Sure, me too. I tried my best to make time for the two of us. However, even after several years, the storks did not arrive. I assumed it was inevitable because having a child is a matter of chance, but I went to the hospital for a checkup. But there, I learned an unexpected fact. I was born with an abnormality in my uterus, making it difficult to conceive. Even if I did conceive, there was a significant risk to my body during delivery. I told this to Oliver when he came home from work. "Oh, I'm so sorry." I apologized to Oliver in tears. Oliver patted my back. "I see. I guess we don't have a choice. I'm the one who has to apologize to you for being too hard on you." He told me that. Oliver appeared to be comforting me while carefully considering his words so as not to hurt me, but I could see that he was very depressed. After that, our relationship changed drastically from what it had been. We were both stumbling for words, not saying much to one another, and not making much eye contact. We became somewhat distant. It is hard to talk to people about this kind of thing between a husband and wife, so girls from the cafe used to tell me, "You're always cheerful. We admire you because you and your partner both work together to keep your marriage going." I could only smile and ignore it. It wasn't really like that. I had no idea what to do, but it was one phone call that brought our marriage to an end. I received a call on my cell phone from my mother-in-law. "Louise, I am sorry to say this over the phone, but could you please break up with Oliver?" When she said that, I was speechless. Oh, so my mother-in-law knows about it. I immediately realized that. "What are you saying? Oliver and I will decide what to do." I couldn't possibly say that to her. "Just think about it." With that, my mother-in-law hung up the phone. Of course, I'm sure she wants to see her grandchildren. I guess I am disqualified as a wife and a daughter-in-law. Things I was trying not to think about kept running through my head, and I couldn't stop them. I was still at work, but I asked the staff to handle the rest, and I decided to leave right away. I then stuffed as much of my belongings into my bag as I could and left the house. Then I went to Ava's house, who was still single and living alone at that time. I sent Oliver a letter and the divorce papers by mail. In reality, such a one-sided separation may be unwise. Oliver called me many times, but I did not answer. He texted me several times, saying he didn't want to divorce me in this manner. But I had a feeling that if I met him, my feelings would change. He won't be able to show his parents the faces of his grandchildren if he stays with me like this. I want Oliver to be happy. I should not be with him. With this in mind, the only option I could think of was to run away. I kept myself hidden behind the scenes at the cafe where I worked. I asked the other staff to refuse Oliver's visits to the cafe. Oliver signed the divorce papers more than 3 months after I handed them to him. We were divorced. On the report paper, "Louise, I appreciate everything you've done for me." That was written. I never did anything to deserve his gratitude. "I am truly sorry." For the first time since leaving home, I responded to his message. Oliver immediately sent me another message. "Can I go to the cafe you mentioned that you want to open once it's completed?" He texted me. "Yes, of course." I was about to text that, but stopped and turned off my phone. I cried and cried and cried until I couldn't cry anymore. The next day, I changed my cell phone number and deleted Oliver's number. I also left the cafe where I had worked for many years and resolved to reinvent myself. There was no going back, no more looking back. I have to go somewhere where I won't be able to look back. I restrained myself from giving in to Oliver's kind words. Even if this makes me feel hard and I want to see Oliver, or even if I want to ask Oliver for his help, I can't now. I would walk my own path with my own feet. That's what I decided in my head. Since then, I've had the opportunity to study at various restaurants, putting my cooking skills to use. On my days off, I researched various restaurants. I couldn't get back into the swing of things after Oliver and I divorced. I gradually began to feel more detached, and I re-immersed myself in my work. 2 years later, I began to take concrete steps towards independence, and today, I am launching my own business. There are still a lot of things I don't understand about running a cafe on my own, and I'm nervous. However, I have always dreamed of owning my own cafe. I am overjoyed that it has come true, and I am more excited than worried. I'm curious what Oliver would say if he saw this. I can't help thinking about that, despite the fact that I have moved on from the past. But now, I might be able to deal with Oliver without taking advantage of him. If Oliver sees it, "Louise, you did it! Congratulations!" Would he say that with a smile on his face? I thought I'll let him go, but I've been thinking about him lately. I hadn't moved on, and I'm surprised at myself. I hope Oliver is still living happily somewhere. 6 months after opening the store, word spread, and despite the fact that my cafe was small, it has grown to the point where, not always, but at least once a day, the place is packed with customers. I can now afford to hire a part-time employee, and I am so busy that I don't have time to think about myself every day. That's what makes it enjoyable for me, and it's also when I'm proud to have my own cafe. Then, one Friday night, because our cafe does not serve alcohol, there aren't many customers on Friday nights. As a result, the girl who works part-time does not work on Fridays. The cafe is open until 10 p.m., but no one has entered since 5 p.m. While I'll consider whether or not to close the cafe for the day. I was writing the daily menu for the next day on the blackboard. I heard a clinking sound and saw someone enter through the door. But I was about to mount the blackboard on the high wall at the time, so I couldn't turn my head that way. "Good evening. Sorry my hands are busy right now. Please take any seat you like." I spoke to the person. I set up the blackboard and looked at the customer who had just entered. He was sitting in the windowsill with a great view, with his back to me. He was a slim man in a suit. I intend to open a cafe that would appeal to men, but the majority of customers were women. So I was very happy to see a male customer. When I arrived with a glass of water, the man was looking down unnaturally, and without saying a word, he pointed to the daily menu. It was a limited lunchtime menu, but since there weren't many customers that day, I decided to prepare it for him. "Sure thing, sir. It'll be an omelette with rice today. Is that okay for you?" When I asked him, he nodded, but he remained silent, looking below. I wondered if he was someone who didn't like to talk much. I decided not to talk to him any longer than was absolutely necessary. I went to the kitchen to cook. He then looked up and started to look around the cafe. Is he interested in the interior? I was also quite particular about interior design, so seeing him interested in it made me happy. Then, about 10 minutes later, when I brought him his omelette, he bowed politely. He is a strange man, but maybe he is a good man. With that thought, I left, but returned a few minutes later to check the amount of water in his glass. "Let me pour you a glass of water." With that, I held the glass in my hand, but there was no response. I was curious, so I looked at the customer and noticed that his shoulders were trembling. He'd only taken 2 bites of the omelette, and his hands had stopped moving. I noticed droplets of water on the table that appeared to be tears when I looked closely. Are you okay?" I looked at the customer's face in surprise. There was a very familiar face, but one I had greatly missed. "Wait! Oliver!" Yes, it was my divorced ex-husband, whom I had not expected at all. Even though I hadn't seen him in years, he was the person I had always been with. I was surprised at myself for not recognizing him right away. His once long hair had been completely shortened, and he was much thinner than before. His appearance has changed so drastically that it was impossible to recognize him from behind. But when he slowly looked up at me, I knew he was Oliver. "I'm sorry. I assumed you didn't want to see me, so I avoided being noticed, but I couldn't stop myself." Hearing Oliver's unchanged voice, which I hadn't heard in a long time, nearly made me cry as well. "No problem, but why are you here?" Even though it is the same city as where we previously lived, this location is quite far away. "I just got a new job, and my office is just around the corner. I overheard one of my staff discussing a new cafe she visited for lunch last week. For some reason, I was curious about it, so I thought I'd come and check it out." I didn't know what to say, so I kept quiet. Because even though I had initiated the divorce so one-sidedly, Oliver was looking for a cafe because he thought I would realize my dream. I was confused, feeling both happy and sorry. Then Oliver continued, "I didn't come here expecting much, but as soon as I walked in, I knew you were there. Then you were really here. I was delighted to see you after such a long time. I ate an omelette with rice and felt nostalgic." Oliver used to tell me that out of everything I cooked, his favorite was an omelette with rice. I remember that gave me confidence in my cooking. "It's been a long time. What's up? I miss you. I am sorry for what I did." So many words came to mind, but I couldn't think of anything to say. "I know that it's too sudden. I might say something strange. Sorry." With that, Oliver continued, "I've always wanted to apologize to you if I ever get to see you again. I wanted to apologize for hurting you, and when I said I wanted to have children with you. I didn't know how to deal with you, so I turned to my mom for advice. Then you vanished, and when I asked my mom about it, she said she had called you. I'm responsible for hurting your feelings. Back then, I was only thinking about myself. You had the right to live your life, but I was being selfish. I should have prioritized you, supported you, and protected you. I'm so sorry." My eyes began to well up with tears before I realized it, and I couldn't stop them. I thought that I wanted Oliver to be happy, but the truth was that I just wanted to get out of my unpleasant situation. Well, Oliver was thinking about me so much. "No, I'm the one who should apologize. I walked away from you without saying anything. I was so selfish that I didn't even try to talk to you. I didn't understand what it meant to be married or live together. I'm the one who hurt you a lot. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I don't recall ever discussing my true feelings with my husband in this way. I was such a big fool to abandon such a good person. After crying a lot, Oliver finished his omelette with rice with gusto. He also ate the dessert that came with the set and said it was delicious. And on the way home, "Can I come back again?" he asked me. I didn't even think about how to respond. "Yes, of course," I told him. Since then, Oliver has been visiting me every Friday night. We've become friends since then, and we can talk about anything. Now we are like best friends. Our relationship has completely changed, and I have no idea how it will evolve in the future. But now, when I spend time with Oliver, I feel more at ease than I have in the past. My left leg stops at the knee. When I was in the 9th grade, on December 10, 2003, I was involved in an accident that required an amputation. I am now 28 years old, and I am working for a major local advertising agency. I work as a designer, mainly creating websites. I play soccer in the junior high school soccer team, and I love to work out. I dreamed of becoming a soccer player in the future. I was a good runner, and soccer was my favorite sport. I was noticed by the prestigious soccer high school because I was chosen for the city and state star teams. I'd been given the go-ahead for enrollment at a particular esteemed institution outside the state. I was thrilled that that high school had competed in the national soccer tournament, and my parents were also very proud of me. Now all I had to do was wait for the graduation ceremony and work diligently every day in order to improve as a soccer player in high school. But why? Why am I remembering something that took place 13 years ago now? December is usually a busy month for work. I used to only think about work, but this year, for some reason, I keep remembering those days. It's not like I'm unhappy with my current job. In fact, I'm overjoyed to be able to put my hobby of drawing to use for work. Despite the fact that the work is difficult and that I frequently encounter difficulties with client requests, I have no regrets about my current occupation. Still, now, 13 years later, I remember those days. Without that incident, my life would have been very different, and my childhood dream could have come true. Maybe I'd be the physical education teacher or a pro soccer player now. All of those thoughts come and go in my mind, disappearing and reappearing. I wondered if it was because I had recently worked overtime at work or if I was simply tired. Then, as I stood up to go to the bathroom, I felt an indescribable abdominal pain. Oh, ouch! 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 I screamed out and fell because it hurt so much. I have no memory of what happened next. The next moment I woke up, I was at the hospital. I vaguely recall an ambulance arriving and transporting me to some hospital. A co-worker had rushed to where I had collapsed and dialed 911. I'd been taken to the emergency room, treated in critical care ward, checked on, and then transferred to the general ward. When I awoke, I was on an IV drip and staring at the hospital ceiling. I was diagnosed with acute enteritis and acute peritonitis. The doctor had just explained to me that I was in serious danger. In other words, I could have lost my life if I had not been treated within 24 hours. Hearing this story, I thanked my colleague for calling an ambulance right away. I suddenly remembered that I had gone through something similar before. That's right. 13 years ago, I was also in the hospital, staring at the ceiling while being given an IV drip. I had been recommended to a prestigious soccer school at the time, so I was working hard to succeed in high school. Then, on December 10, on my way home from practice, I lost one of my legs below the knee at an intersection. At the time, a young girl, probably in 3rd grade, was about to cross the street. A large truck entered the intersection without signaling. I didn't think. "Look out!" I yelled and dashed as fast as I could, grabbing the girl in my arms and collapsing. The truck stopped about 20 meters ahead of me, and the driver ran up to me. I was surrounded by people who were staring at me with shocked expressions. I was still lying on the road and didn't realize that my left leg was crushed. I don't know if it was because of the pain, but I just passed out. I only regained consciousness after having my knee amputated and being treated in the emergency room. Even then, I still have a faint memory of being carried away in an ambulance. When I awoke in the hospital, my mother was sobbing uncontrollably, and my father was holding her and supporting her. My mom was crying so hard, so I remember I was afraid to ask her what had happened to me. It didn't take me long to realize that my leg had been amputated. As the and the painkillers wore off. An indescribable pain came over me. I could feel my leg, but there was nothing below the knee when I looked at it, and it was bandaged. This was a common symptom of amputation. The nerves and brain, they claim, create the illusion that the leg that was supposed to be amputated is still there. That was exactly what was occurring. Moreover, the feeling did not go away for a while. I was transferred to a general ward after my condition had stabilized to some extent. Although I survived, I lost my leg and was not in a good mental state. I was worried about not being able to play soccer anymore, about not being able to attend the high school of my choice, and about giving up on my dream. My anxiety about my future life hit me all at once, and I spent many days crying just to keep my mind together. Then one day, the girl I had saved and her parents came to visit me in my hospital room. My mother appeared to have noticed that I was feeling a little more stable and had granted them permission. The girl and her parents came up to me in tears, but they quickly ran out of words when they saw me. I beckoned to the girl, who was looking down, and handed her a piece of chocolate. "Were you hurt?" I asked her, and she responded to me in a trembling voice. "I wasn't hurt, but your leg is gone." And she was all crying. The girl's parents were also crying. "We are so grateful for everything you've done for our daughter." They only said that, but they seemed to be at a loss for words. To be honest, I didn't know how to react. Anyway, "What is your name?" I asked the girl. "Emily," she answered. I patted Emily on the head. "I'm glad we're both alive. You must be cautious the next time you cross the pedestrian crossing." I told her that. I had to be hospitalized for a while, but Emily came to see me once a week on Sundays, accompanied by her mother. At first, I felt a sense of regret that I had tried to help her and it ended up like this. However, as she came to see me again and again, I began to feel in my heart that Emily was fortunate to be alive. I was also uplifted. The wound was still not completely healed, but I only needed to go to the outpatient appointments. I never saw Emily again. In terms of high school, I declined the recommendation and was able to attend a high school 20 minutes away by car. I really wanted to join an athletic club, but that was difficult. I joined the art club because I also like drawing as a hobby. 6 months after the accident, I finally had a prosthetic leg mold made and began walking in rehabilitation at the hospital's outpatient clinic. The wound had healed and was clean and free of infection. The strange sensation of having just had a leg amputated had faded, and I was now sensually aware that I didn't have a leg. During my rehabilitation, I gradually gained the ability to walk without a cane. I remember being overjoyed when the hospital doctor complimented my standing posture, saying I didn't look like someone who had had one leg amputated. Finally, I was able to get rid of my wheelchair and crutches. That alone made me happy. I did my best in rehabilitation. I became accustomed to the activities of the art club and began to consider becoming a designer in the future. I decided to go to an art college. And now, I work as a designer at a major local advertising agency, where I also create websites and do marketing. If the previous accident hadn't been a few seconds off, or if I had collapsed alone, I might not be alive now. I was really glad that I survived. As I was thinking about what had just happened and what had happened before, I noticed a young nurse standing at the hospital room's entrance. I thought she probably came to change the IV bag, but the IV was still half full. I wondered if this nurse had anything to say to me. "Hello," so I spoke to her. Then, "I'm glad you were better," she said. I was impressed that all the nurses here are patient-friendly. Do you remember someone by the name of Emily?" She continued to speak to me. When I was troubled, the nurse continued, "I appreciate what you did for me back then." Even when she said that, I had no idea what she meant. "Oh, I'm Emily, the girl you saved 15 years ago. You don't remember me anymore, do you?" With that, I finally recalled. I was really surprised to see that Emily, who I saved back then, was now an adult. "What? What are you doing here?" I was so perplexed that I asked her a question to which I should have known the answer if I had seen her uniform. "Since then, I have wanted to become a nurse in the future, and this year I finally got my nursing license and started working at this hospital." That's what she said. Emily continued, "I have never forgotten about you. When I was about to give up on my studies to become a nurse, I remember that you saved my life, and because of that, I've been able to do my best up until now." I was happy to hear that. I am overjoyed to hear this from an adult woman who does not resemble the child I remember. I was even happier, and it brought back memories because Emily was the one telling me that, rather than hearing from someone I've never met. All of the emotions were so mixed up that it was difficult to express them. Emily arrived at work in the morning, and during a meeting about new patients in general ward, and she heard a familiar name, so she had come to see me just in case. She was really worried about me being unconscious. If I had been unlucky, I might have died, but I am still alive, and hearing about it from Emily. I feel even more alive now that I am alive. My health gradually improved, and I was able to leave the ward where Emily worked. I pushed myself and invited her out for dinner. Emily gladly accepted my invitation. We exchanged WhatsApp numbers, and on my first day off, after being released from the hospital, we went out to eat together. We talked about everything that had happened to us and what we were doing up until this point, but we couldn't talk about everything. We met by chance, or rather fate, and we felt destined for each other, and to our surprise, we ended up going out. 3 years later, we were married. Emily, who was only a child at the time, was destined to become my wife. The accident at the time was also a fateful event that brought us together. That's what I think now. It was my sophomore year of high school. I was quite a good student, athletic, and weird for me to say, but I was also quite good looking. So I was in the so-called sexy group in my class for my freshman year, and I was having a good time every day. But things changed when I became a sophomore. The members in the first year all got along well and were enjoying a student life, but when the class changed in the second year, the classmates changed completely, and the atmosphere was not so nice anymore. It was because one girl was being bullied badly. It seems that girl had been bullied since the first year. On the first day of her second year, the bullying had already taken place. Honestly, she looks cute, although she seems to have a dark personality. So I had no idea why she was being bullied. It was so uncomfortable seeing her whenever she was bullied. I approached the girl as soon as I saw the bullying, but she was like, "It's okay, just leave me alone." and she just pushed me away. I honestly thought that is why the bullying is going on. After that, I decided to stay out of it. 2 months passed. I tried not to get involved because of what she said that day, and tried to stop it when it seemed to escalate too much. Bullying between girls is vicious and often happens out of sight. Then, one day, her desk and chair were missing from the classroom. More direct bullying than usual. A group of girls, probably the perpetrators, were giggling. I couldn't understand at all why they would do such a thing. It was hard to just stand by and watch, and because she hadn't come to school yet, I tried to find her desk and chair, hoping to find them before she arrives to school. But I couldn't find them in the time. She had arrived at school. When I went out to the hallway to look for her desk outside the classroom, I ran into her coming to school. Our eyes met, and I felt kind of bad, so in an instant, "Oh, I think one of the desks is missing, so I'll go and look for it," I said. She instantly understood what was going on in the classroom and said, "Thank you." She smiled at me with a look that I had never seen before. I will never forget that smile. With the word "thank you," she turned around and walked back down the hallway she had came and left the classroom. After all, she did not return to the classroom that day. So I told the teacher that her desk is missing and left her to deal with it. I think she knew it was bullying. But for some reason, the adults would not try to do anything. These days, when bullying problems become public within the school, they pretend that nothing is happening because it's difficult to control the complaints from the parents. Seeing such a dirty part of the school, I started to hate the adults in my second year of high school. Then class started, but I couldn't forget the smile she showed me and was unable to get through the class that day. The next day, she came to school before me. The teacher had put her desk back in class yesterday, and she seemed to be able to sit in her seat today. I was kind of happy, so I said, "Good morning," and approached her. I had approached her before, but she had never responded and always looked down. So I had stopped talking to her from some point, because I thought she wouldn't like it anyway. But today, I got carried away and ended up saying hi. Fearfully, I looked at her face. Then she gave me a bigger smile than yesterday and said, "Good morning," and responded to me. His smile completely knocked my heart out. Actually, I thought anyone would fall in love with her smile. The class that day ended without nothing happening. The kids who were bullying her usually went to her every break time to set up something nasty. Maybe they thought it was a bad idea because the teacher put the desk back after the incident from yesterday. I don't know what the reality is, but I am more than happy that nothing happened. In fact, this should be normal. Then, on the way home from school, as I was going home by my usual path, I saw her a little ahead of me. She noticed me, and for the first time she approached me. "Thank you for yesterday. You really saved my life. How about we stop by somewhere?" she asked me, and I gladly agreed. A short walk took us to the destination. It was an old house-like warehouse. The place was dimly lit and didn't look like a house where people could live. "What is this place?" I asked her. "This is my house," she answered bluntly. I was surprised. Then she took me inside her house and asked me to take a seat. "Just take a seat wherever you like." I sat down in front of the table. After about 30 seconds of silence, she suddenly started talking about what had been happening to her since she entered high school. She told me that when she first started school, she was able to have a normal life in a group of pretty girls. She has a strong personality and has high pride, so they sometimes argued but they got along well. Then one day, the leader of the group was in a bad mood. She got into an argument with her over a small matter, and they got into a serious fight. The next day, the leader of the group started bullying her. At first, it seemed that some people called out to her, but because of her strong personality, her pride would not allow her to ask for help from others. So she pushed people away like I was done when I first started talking to her. It was a vicious cycle, and the bullying gradually escalated. Then she told me the details of the bullying. It was so heroic that I honestly had a hard time listening to it. When I looked at her face, I saw tears falling down her face. But she seemed to feel a little better than before, because she was able to let out her worries that she had been carrying all by herself. From there, we had an enjoyable chit-chat. Until late at night, we talked about other people's complaints, test scores, and so on. I decided to go home, as I thought it's not a good idea to stay at a girl's house until so late. I didn't want to ruin the time that I had wanted to continue for so long, but I was still a high school student, so I had no choice. But I knew there would be plenty of opportunities to talk to her again tomorrow. And as I was leaving, she looked a little sad and said, "Thank you for today. See you again." I wondered if she also enjoyed the time just like I did, and wondered if she felt that she wanted this time to continue too. Although I couldn't understand why she looked so sad at the end, I said, "Thank you too. See you tomorrow," and left her house. The next day, she didn't come to school. She wasn't there. And the next day, and again, the next day. Isn't she away too much? That's what I thought, so I decided to ask the teacher. And the teacher said, "She switched to another school," as if nothing had happened. My mind went blank and I was so upset. I had a lot of questions I wanted to ask her. After taking a deep breath and calmed down, I asked the teacher my first question. "Why didn't you inform the class about it?" Then the teacher said, "I'm sorry, but I can't tell you that." But it took me less than a second to realize what she meant. And with that answer, all my doubts were clear. Why she went to another school, why the teacher didn't tell the class about this. I'm not sure what the truth is, but I assume it's probably something to do with the bullying of her. I was filled with anger and didn't know where to let out my anger. I could not accept the reality. I hardly remember anything that happened from then on. That's because I lived almost every day as if I had lost my energy. I felt that I wanted to find out the reason somehow, but at the time, I had neither the knowledge nor the courage to find someone who had moved away due to bullying. It took me about a month to accept the reality that she had changed schools. When I was finally able to look forward, I tried hard to focus on my future, so that maybe one day I will be able to see her again someday. From that day on, I studied hard every day. I had no choice but to do my best. She was surprisingly very smart and extremely talented. So if I go to a university with a high deviation score, I might be able to meet her again. Thinking about it now, I was too childish to study like that. Then, I was able to get into one of the top universities in the US. I was really happy, but the reality, of course, she was not there. I was still thinking about her. It was around this time that I finally understood that she was my first love. The 4 years of university was almost fruitless, just meaningless time passing by. I was probably burned out in a sense since I had entered a top-level university. I didn't even bother to go job hunting and ended up working for an ordinary small company. However, it was a typical blacklisted company that use new employees to make them work long hours and don't pay for overtime. But I was still able to put in some effort because I had a dream of meeting her again, which I recalled from time to time. Looking back, I think it would have been better to change to a different company. At that time, all I could think about was just to get everything done, so I didn't even have time to think about changing jobs. The new employees around me quit within a few months, but I hanged on, and 2 years passed. Needless to say, I had no information about her during those 2 years. Then, one day, the company I was working for suddenly went bankrupt. It was a well-known company to some extent, so I did not expect this to happen. The media found out that someone above me had embezzled money, and all sorts of things came to light. They decided that they could not continue the operation. I was filled with anger. At the same time, I heard a sudden snap in my head. After that, I became numb, no emotions. The anger I had been storing up towards the adults. I was angry at her for leaving without saying anything. This time, it was all to blame the stupid adults. I lost my job and was at a loss. I spent more than a day in my apartment, thinking about the future. When I left my apartment to buy something to eat at a store nearby, as I was so hungry, I saw an expensive car parked in front. It looked stunning, but I wasn't that interested, so I just passed by. But as I was about to walk past it, I heard my name being called out of the driver's seat. It sounded strangely familiar. I turned around, and there she was, the girl I had been looking for all along, looking even prettier than before. She was smiling at me with a smile that was many times brighter than before. I was so surprised that I was speechless. It was as if the time had stopped, as if in slow motion, and my mind was whirling. But when I saw her smile, I wanted to forgive her for all the anger I had harbored over the years. When I was being speechless, she asked, "Want to stop by somewhere?" She approached me. I didn't immediately get what she meant, but those were the words that I had heard the first time I went to her home a long time ago. I couldn't smile like I used to, but I gladly agreed. We drove to her house in the luxury car she was driving. When I arrived, I found that it was a very large tower condo. When she showed me to her place, she said, "Take a seat wherever you like." Like when we were back in high school. What was different from the old days was that the room was so big that it took me a long time to choose a place to sit. As soon as she sat down, I told her something that had been bothering me for a long time. "Why did you change schools? Why didn't you tell me? What happened after that?" I asked her everything I was curious about, why she is living in such a nice place now. And she kept her smile and answered to all my questions. That her parents passed away and she had to move to a new school because her relatives had to take care of her. She wanted to tell me that day, but she couldn't. And now she is the president of a business company of which I used to work for. When the company I worked for went bankrupt, they were looking for new employment for their employees, and she found me from a list of employees recommended by the company. When she found out I was around, she decided to go and see me right away. But she was worried about coming to see me because she thought I might be angry with her about the past and that she had no right to see me. Though she kept thinking about how I was doing, whom seemed to be the only one who had been kind to her back then. She made the courage to come to see me. We talked and talked and talked, and I was so exhausted that I fell asleep before I knew it. And I ended up working for her, also as her secretary. I'm a still new secretary, and being trained hard by the president with high pride. But I want to support her as much as I can, both at work and private life, under the supervision of the president with a lovely smile. I'm a business person who graduated from college and just started working. This is the most memorable and shocking story of my life. I was born and raised in the countryside by the sea, far from the city. My family had only 3 people. My father, who was quiet but kind. My mother was a bit naive, but always had a smile on her face. And me. It was so rural that it was difficult to get the latest items. And we had to drive for hours to go shopping. But for me, as a child, it was a comfortable place where I could stretch out and play, and I loved it. I thought those days would continue as a matter of course. That changed when I was about 10 years old. My father died suddenly, and my mother and I were left behind in a small village in the countryside. This village is where my father was born and raised. Mom seemed to like the place we lived as a family, but living with a small child was quite inconvenient. So Mom decided to move to another place closer to the town. Mom's family and relatives had died before I was born. We only had each other. I remember missing my father and realizing how much he meant to us. My mom was acting stout-hearted, but now that I think about it, she was probably forcing herself to smile, not to make me feel uneasy. We used to live in a big house in the countryside, but there were only 2 of us now. We moved into a small house. At first, I thought it was tiny, but I soon got used to it. I went to elementary school there, but there were no children around my age in the neighborhood, and I had no one to play with. My mother was away at work during the day, and I remember feeling quite lonely. It was an elderly couple who lived next door who saved me at that time. I had never met them before, and at first, my mom and I were a little reserved and distant from them. They took very good care of me, and I became completely spoiled. I once asked the lady why she treated me so well, and she said, "What are you talking about? You and I are distant relatives. Don't be shy. Tell me whatever you want." I thought my mother and I were all alone. I was very happy to hear her words. I had always loved her, but I felt even closer to her when I discovered she was a relative. She became more and more important to me. When I came home from school, she would bring me snacks daily. She would smile and listen to my stories about what happened at school. She even prepared dinner for me. She even took care of me until my mom came home from work. I thought there were only 2 of us, but there were 4 of us. Eventually, we got to know this couple's acquaintances and relatives. We used to have got together with more than 10 people. During the summer and winter break, their grandchildren came to visit. They were 3 to 4 years older than me. They cared for me. I remember it was a lot of fun. Very few people my age were in the town, so I enjoyed every day. It became a place that was so important to me. Growing up, I didn't see them as much as I did in elementary school. I went to a junior high school a little farther away. I joined the soccer club, which I had longed for, and club activities became my greatest pleasure. Sometimes I wondered how they were doing. I was sure that they would understand that I was enjoying my school life. I was free to do what I wanted. Besides, My mom visited them several times a week and told her how I was doing. Then, in the summer, when I was in my second year of high school, Mom told me something. "Oh, by the way, their grandchildren who cared for you when you were little are visiting tomorrow. Why don't you visit them?" I thought it would be a good time to see everyone for the first time in a while. I had some free time between my soccer practices, so I was thinking of showing up. Although I was happy to see them, I wondered why they were returning then. They are both college students and should be in the semester now. They last came back a few years ago. So I decided to ask my mom, "Why are they coming back at this time of year?" Then Mom answered, "Their great-grandfather passed away, and there's going to be a funeral." She said it as if it was not our business. "I didn't know we had a great-grandfather. We should go to the funeral." I was surprised because I didn't know they had a great-grandfather. I thought that if we were relatives, we might as well attend the funeral. Then, my mom gave me a surprising answer. She said, "This funeral is for relatives only. It's not right for us to participate, no matter how close they are to us." Her words took me aback. I thought they were my relative, but my mom talked as if they were strangers. I thought she was joking, but her face looked serious. What do you mean?" I couldn't get my head clear. "Aren't we related to them?" I asked fearfully. Then, Mom replied, "They treat us like family, but we are not blood related. Did you think they were relatives?" Mom looks at me with a surprised look on her face. "But she said we were related." I was hoping she would tell me she was just kidding. She wanted to tell that we were like her real relatives. Seeing Mom's face, I felt that this was the truth. I was completely convinced that I was a part of their family, unable to accept what Mom was saying. They were my grandma and grandpa and older brothers and sisters. I had a lot of fond memories with them. And when I thought back on how they had spoiled me without knowing they were not my relatives, I gradually began to feel embarrassed. "Why didn't you tell me earlier? I feel like an idiot for thinking they were my real relatives." My embarrassment turned into anger, and I took it out on my mother. Mom looked sad, but I couldn't stop my emotions. "We both had dinner with them and relied on them, and you still say we're not really related?" When I said that much, I saw Mom's body shaking. "Yeah, sorry. The couple next door is not our relatives." And I noticed that my mother was shedding tears, but I didn't feel like apologizing. "You knew they were strangers, and you relied on them so much. Don't you feel any shame?" I shut myself away in my room. When my mother told me their grandchildren had returned home, I ignored her. They seemed worried about me, but I couldn't show my face to them. I suddenly felt embarrassed and didn't know what to do. Then, a few months passed without seeing them. My words seemed to have made it difficult for Mom to visit them. We started spending time alone again, but they were still concerned about me. I was pleased they brought some food to Mom, who happened to be passing by. One day in winter, when my mom and I were preparing dinner, we heard someone's voice at the front door. I was really surprised because no one had visited us at home recently. Mom opened the front door, and the grandma said she had made too much soup and wanted to share it with us. The smell of that soup Reaching the living room made me nostalgic, and I almost cried just thinking about it. But I thought, I'm not a real relative, so I shouldn't rely on her so much. So I sat on the chair, holding back my desire to see her face. You guys haven't seen me at all lately. Are you eating well? I hadn't heard her voice in a while. I'm sorry. Yes, we're fine. I wondered if Mom felt the same way because she sounded about to cry. I'm glad to hear that. You only have one body, so don't be too hard on yourself, okay? She sounds like a kind and gentle grandma. How is your son doing? I haven't seen him for a long time. She is just out of sight from the front door. She probably doesn't even know I'm there. She cheerfully told my mom that she would be happy to see me sometime. But my mom said, We shouldn't keep relying on you. We have to do things on our own. I'm his mother, so I have to be firm. Her voice was trembling, as if she was about to cry. What is it? Did you stop showing your face because you were worried about that? Mom's nervousness must have been broken because she burst into tears. We decided to talk. Grandpa was very concerned about the situation. I felt embarrassed and happy to sit around the table with the four of us for the first time in a while. Even I was about to cry, but we told them that I thought they were relatives, and I relied on them too much. I was embarrassed when I learned the truth and turned my anger towards Mom. My mom doesn't visit them because of this incident. We told them the whole truth. Then they looked at me, puzzled, and I was shocked by what they said after listening to my story. What are you guys talking about? You and we have the same last name, don't we? You can think of us as distant relatives, can't you? My grandma told us. Indeed, the fact that we shared the same last name was one of the main reasons I believed we were related. After Grandma, Grandpa started talking. We are all brothers and sisters, even if we don't share the same last name. When you are a human, you are somehow connected. Whether we are related or not does not matter. Even if we are not related by blood, it doesn't change the fact that we love you guys. I think of you guys as my daughter and grandson. Don't be shy. Show your cheerful face to this old man. That's what makes me the happiest. I had not expected such kind words to come back to me, but I couldn't hold back any longer and cried loudly. My mother sitting next to me, is also crying aloud. Then I realized something. My mom lost her parents and her husband. She must have been even more inconsolable and lonely than I was. After that, I visited them more than before, and my mom smiled more often. A little over a year later, I moved to New York to go to college. Grandma sent me some food on a regular basis. They always included a note saying, "You should eat healthy." Mom is having meals with them daily, and they seem to enjoy their lives. I am so glad that I didn't have to leave Mom home alone and lonely. Even now, when I go back to my hometown to visit them, they give me a lot of snacks, as they did in elementary school. For me, this space where the four of us spend time together is my precious family home. My wife died 10 years ago, and I was living with my 8-year-old daughter and 3-year-old son at the time. I knew that my daughter and son were very depressed I had always wondered how I could help them. I was the only parent they had left, so I felt obligated to make them happy in some way. But I couldn't do anything to cheer them up. I was frustrated by my own inadequacy. Every day, I was chasing after memories of my late wife. Even though I was their father, I felt ashamed of myself. I blamed myself every day. Loneliness seemed to have overtaken the entire house. Still, time did not stop. Whatever we lost, time passed as usual. Every day, I woke up, made breakfast for my daughters, and saw my daughter off to elementary school. And then I dropped my son off at kindergarten before heading to work. To be honest, working while grieving for my wife was extremely difficult. Furthermore, just thinking about my son's and daughter's emotions made me feel like my head was going to explode. But we couldn't live if I didn't work. For the sake of my kids, I really tried to work hard. It was at that time I had to go on a business trip for work and had to be away from home. I had to ask my mother to take care of my children for a while. To be honest, I was so worried that I couldn't even consider going on a business trip. When I was informed about the business trip, I wanted to refuse it and stay at home with my children. However, it was an important job, so I couldn't say no and decided to go. The trip lasted about a week. Throughout that week, I made numerous phone calls to hear the voices of my children. I called to make sure they were as comfortable as possible. Hearing their voices on the phone naturally motivated me to go to work the next day. I was calling in order to reassure the two children, but I had the impression that they were the ones cheering me up. When I came home after my business trip, "Dad, you're home!" "There you are, Dad." My children greeted me with smiles on their faces. Seeing their smiling faces, I naturally started smiling too. "I'm home." I smiled back at the children and went inside the house. The atmosphere in the house appeared to have shifted slightly. I did not ask them anything. If I asked them something I didn't have to, the atmosphere might revert to the lonely one we'd previously had. Because there was a chance that something like that would have occurred. Afterward, I cooked dinner for the children and talked about the past week. "Did you miss me during my week away?" "I didn't. You called us quite frequently. I'm now in elementary school. You could have gone away for longer." We talked about such casual things for a long time. It wasn't exactly like old times, but I felt like we had a good time eating for the first time in a long time. My daughter began to smile more frequently after that, and my son hardly ever cried. But looking at them, I felt disgusted with myself. Because I was still skeptical that I could recover as well as my children. I miss my wife. My children must have missed their mother as well, but they were doing their best to move on. Yet, I had not changed at all. I still thought about my wife every day and felt like crying. I should be the one to lead the children, but I haven't been able to make any changes. I even felt angry at myself. Then, my son handed me a letter from his kindergarten. The letter contained details about the upcoming sports day. My eyes stopped at one point while reading the letter. There was a program there called Let's Dance with Mommy, and the program consisted of the children and their mothers playing in a circle while holding hands. How insensitive of them to schedule such a program at this time, I thought. I considered asking my mother to participate in the program since I couldn't. But I knew that wasn't possible. My mother was almost 75 years old. Even though my son was only 3 years old, she lacked the athletic ability to keep up with the child's physical fitness. I was curious about what families without mothers would do. So I called out to the kindergarten teacher as I dropped my son off the next day. "Good morning. Excuse me? I'd like to ask you about the program called Let's Dance with Mommy. What should children without mothers do?" Then the kindergarten teacher said, "In that case, one of our teachers or their fathers can dance in their place." With that, I considered the possibility of participating. But then, I began to think that my son would be embarrassed. Because every other child will be with their mothers, and I was concerned that he might be made fun for being the only one with his father. I couldn't stand by and watch my son's precious memories be trampled on. I was troubled, but decided to ask the kindergarten teacher to take my place. The day of the sports day was a beautiful sunny day with no clouds in the sky, a perfect day for it. The children were overjoyed to have a sunny day for their sports day. "What a nice weather!" "It sure is. I'll do my best today." Even though the weather was fine, my feelings were not fine, because my mind was preoccupied with the program. Was it really a good idea to ask the teacher for assistance, or should I have been the one to participate? I wondered if my son would object to my participation, given that everyone else there was a mother. I considered asking my son which he preferred, but I was afraid to hear his response. Was this truly the best thing to do? I asked myself several times. I forced myself to believe it was the only option we had. And then the sports day began. The part, Let's Dance with Mommy program, was scheduled to take place in the afternoon. Until that point, I was determined to concentrate solely on my son's performance. Then the morning competition was over, and it was time for a lunch break. My mother also arrived, and we shared the lunch she had prepared for us. However, even while we were eating, I was concerned about the first program of the afternoon, Let's Dance with Mommy, despite my conviction that I had made the correct decision. So I directly asked my son, "What are you going to do with your part, Let's Dance with Mommy?" My son smiled. "I have an idea," he said that. I was relieved to hear his response. His homeroom teacher had most likely arranged for him to dance with her. "I see. I'll be watching you. Good luck." I told him that. And when the time came, my son ran to the waiting area. And then the Let's Dance with Mommy program began. But I was speechless at the sight in front of me. "Come on, Jack, let's go!" My daughter was there telling him that. I was surprised because I had expected the teacher to dance with him. My son also heard those words, "Okay." And with a smile, he took my daughter, Sophia's hand in his, and they danced happily together. Seeing my surprised face, my mother, who was sitting next to me, said, "While you were away on a business trip, Jack kept crying as usual. He was causing problems for Sophia. But then Sophia said to Jack, 'Mom is gone, but I'm here, right?' The truth is that Daddy misses her terribly, but he's not crying, is he? Do you know why? That's because he is a man. You are a man too, right, Jack? So it's all right now, right? You won't cry anymore because you're a man, right? I will be the mom for you and Daddy, okay?" That's exactly what Sophia said. From that point on, Jack stopped crying. The kids are trying their best to get over it. I was really surprised when I heard that. I was surprised to learn that my daughter was encouraging my son instead of me and acting as a mother figure to him. Even though she had become a big sister, I had assumed she was still a child who required a lot of attention, but she had matured so much. And just when I thought I was a terrible father, I couldn't stop crying. I was in the middle of my son's sports day, surrounded by people, and I couldn't stop crying. And even now, 10 years later, when I think back to that day, I still cry. My daughter will be moving to New York next year. I know I'm a terrible father, but there's something I need to tell you right now. Thank you for supporting our family. You were the best mother we have in our family.